All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. If I can find it. Desktop share. All right, bear with me for a second while I find my Canva screen.
And you have like a million things open.
I do. That's how I live. Well, my brain looks like that too. There's so much going on, always. All right, just here. Okay.
Great looking slides.
That's all Canva. They do a great job. They make it so easy. I was on PowerPoint before and yeah. All right, company-wide on Tuesday, we had a really good speaker. He talked to us about how to stay out of court when doing your agent visual inspection disclosures. He had some cool fun facts that I'll go over in a little bit. But I really wanted to discuss how to make sure your disclosures are complete and why that is so important, and specifically the TDS, the transfer disclosure statement. In my compliance and in my TC business, this form is the number one form that comes back as not being complete. And so I'm going to go over why that's important and how to complete it. Okay. So as we all know, there is a time frame in your purchase agreement of when the seller disclosures are due to the other side. Okay, the standard of that is 7 days. That can be negotiated if you have a quicker timeline for inspections or review of those documents. That could be sooner, or if you have a tricky situation, it could be. But we are held to the standard of the timeline in that purchase agreement. And it states that the seller shall deliver to buyer fully completed disclosures, okay? Not unsigned ones, not half filled out, fully completed by that timeline. Okay, what happens if it's not fully completed? Incomplete disclosures equal non-delivery. Okay, so technically it has not been delivered if it is incomplete. And we see that in the RPA section 14B3. Buyer is advised not to remove contingencies related to review of documents until after the documents have been delivered. Okay, so usually we're on our buyers, let's remove things and whatnot, but if you haven't performed as the seller, they are right here in the RPA telling the buyer to not remove that contingency. So what would the buyer do if this 7 days comes and goes? They should be sending a notice to seller to perform, to provide them with the completed disclosures so that they have time to review them and make sure that they're okay with everything they see and get questions answered that they might have. Okay, and then in section J2 of the RPA, it says, for the contingency for review of seller documents, prelim or HOA, buyer has until the time specified in the RPA, which would be 17 days typically, or 5 days after delivery, whichever is later. Okay, so that means, let's say the standard is 17 days that they have to review the documents, sign it, get it back. It's usually the same exact timeline as the inspection contingency. The standards are all in the RPA. Again, that can be negotiated and changed. However, the standard is 17 days. So 17 days, you need all of those back as the seller. But what happens if on day 12, you still don't have given those to the buyer? What if it's day 14 and you just now give the buyer those disclosures? It says right there that they have 5 days to look at those. So this day 17 might come, and if you gave it on day 14, they get some extra days to review. Okay, so we really need to make sure we're watching our timeline so that we don't unintentionally give the buyer more time. All right, section or part 2 of 14B3 If delivery of any report occurs after a contractual contingency pertaining to that report has already been waived or removed, the delivery of the report does not revive the contingency, but there may be a right to terminate for a subsequent or amended disclosure under paragraph 11G. Okay, so if they went ahead and removed that contingency anyway before you had given them the fully completed disclosures, or maybe something else happened and you had to amend the TDS and the SPQ, which definitely happens, so things happen sometimes. This is stating that it doesn't reopen the full contingency for that buyer. However, they may have the right to terminate based on that new information. Okay, so let's see what 11G has to say about termination rights for disclosures. If any disclosure or amended disclosure is delivered to the buyer after the contingency has been removed, the buyer shall have the right to terminate this agreement within 5 days after delivery by email. You notice my dots, I took out some of the verbiage because it's really long and it's 3 days if it's delivered by hand, whatnot. In our day and age, we're doing everything by email for the most part. So once it's delivered to them, they have 5 days. Okay, if buyer does not rescind within this time period, buyer has deemed to have approved the disclosure and shall not have the right to cancel. Okay, so they don't have to send you another contingency removal or anything like that. If you send them the amended TDS, they actually have that 5-day window to look it over and to terminate the contract if what they learned is something that they don't want to continue with the purchase on. If you hear nothing, 5 days comes and goes, you're good to go. There's nothing they need to do. It is deemed that they approve it. Any questions so far? Okay, recap. An incomplete disclosure is considered not delivered. Buyer is advised not to remove that contingency if they have not received all of the disclosures. 3, buyer potentially has up to 5 extra days to remove their contingency if the disclosure is delivered late. I say potentially because it depends on when it is delivered. And 4, if the contingency has been removed, the buyer may have the right to cancel if new or amended disclosures are given. Okay, that's the recap of what we just went over. Moving on, how do we make sure our TDS is complete? Number 1, section 1 of the TDS, which I'm going to show you in a second, is this little section called other disclosures and forms. This 95% of the time is missed. Okay, this is something that maybe we just don't understand. Maybe the seller's not fully understanding what it means. I know there's different philosophies on whether you have your sellers complete them by hand or if you send them through services like Glide or Breeze to have them fill it out. If it's through one of the digital services, this is never missed because they have to answer yes or no to a question. So if you like to sit with your sellers and have them fill it out by hand, which is totally fine, you need to make sure that section 1 is absolutely completed. Okay, and we'll look at that in a second. Another one is section 2. Seller must complete all the questions that they are asked in the TDS in all of section 2. And if they answer yes to anything, they have to have an explanation for that yes. Okay, it can be handwritten in there. If they're using Glide or Breeze, they will start typing. If it's too long, it will automatically create a text overflow addendum that is attached at the bottom. Okay, and then number 3, the agent section has to be fully completed, the listing agent side, okay? Including the AVID form, and we'll go over that in a second as well. Okay, so there's 3 sections that have to be completed. Number 1, oh good, it came up. Okay.
Post-production.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, here is the screenshot of section 1. You'll notice the address is there. Or I want to point out the date. Please always put the date that they are filling this out. It's going to reference back to lots of things, okay? We need the date. But here's section 1, coordination with other disclosure forms. You will notice there are 3 boxes here. They're asking if there are any documents that go along with the TDS. Okay, it's a kind of confusing because it says substituted disclosures and people go, what does that mean? What am I substituting? That's why we have this next form called the DIA, and I made this required for our office. The Disclosure Information Advisory. It's a 3-page document that should go out when you do your disclosures. It literally tells the seller how to complete the disclosures. So right here in section 4, completing specific types for the TDS section 1 allows seller to incorporate and provide reports and disclosures that relate to the information requested in the disclosure form. Okay, there are all those questions. Some of them might ask, were there insurance claims? Oh, yes, there was. Okay, now I need to check that I am attaching the information and invoices from that claim. Okay, if maybe they fell out of contract and now they have other reports and you're talking and disclosing about that, you can list that there.
Would that be where a pest report goes?
You can put that there, yes. It doesn't necessarily, if the seller learned things from that pest report and now they're putting it into their TDS. Typically, well, I guess in that situation, the TDS is probably already done. So you wouldn't do that unless the seller did their own pest inspection and had done stuff from it, learned things from it. You would attach that there.
Like a previous?
Yeah, I see Irma has a question.
I'm working with the relocation company, and this is the first time I've ever had one that actually is a person on the other side. They do their own inspections prior to me getting the listing,
Okay,
and I'm kind of confused with how they want me to handle those disclosures, because they keep telling me that they don't belong to the actual owner of the property, but the owner has access to those reports. So my question is, and I need to call them to ask them, because of what you just said.
Is it a corporate move?
Yes,
Yeah, then, yeah, the corporation handles all the disclosures and all that stuff.
But those would be,
but we have inspections now.
so they would be reports that.
I would
Check
think
the
that you would need to give those
So I'm
to,
good, and
the
I'm glad
buyer.
I'm here, because I was gonna call the relocation company and ask her and tell her, hey, we're in the state of California, and I don't know if this is a national thing,
Mhm.
but in California is we have knowledge of any reports. We have to give them to the buyer, and the seller has to disclose that he has a roof test and
Yes.
general inspection.
Mhm.
And what's really interesting on this side, the seller is obligated to do any repairs that the relocation is deeming them to do
Oh, wow.
at their cost, at the owner's cost, because if we don't sell the property, then the relocation company buys the property directly from the homeowner.
Gotcha.
So I'm glad.
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
was-
We're glad you're here too.
Okay, notice it says, providing these substituted disclosures does not eliminate your responsibility to fully and completely disclose all information known by you that is requested in the TDS. And they're talking directly to the seller here. That's why it says you, seller. Just because you're giving a report doesn't exclude you. You still need to have the responsibility of disclosing everything that you know. And right there in bold, it says for the TDS to be complete, one of the 3 boxes provided in section 1 must be checked. If no substituted disclosures are being provided, seller shall check the box that indicates no substituted disclosures for this transfer. Okay, so again, right here, these 3, one of these 3 has to be checked. If you don't know, if your seller doesn't know, when in doubt, just check no substituted disclosures. You can always add things later.
So in my case, you're gonna check that you have, inspections, whatever that says. Additional.
Inspection reports completed pursuant to the contract of sale or receipt of deposit, or I would check the additional inspection reports or disclosures. if you actually have them. Okay,
I don't have them. The sellers have them.
yeah, but again, the seller is filling this
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
Okay, not you. You're not going to check anything. Okay, moving on.
You know what I use as a rule of thumb when I'm having my clients do the TDS? I always tell them, if you have to go to court, this is going with us, and I will not be responsible for your check mark. So you need to complete it as thoroughly as you can. And then they're really like, oh, really? It's like, yeah, really. that's
Yeah.
what happened."
Yeah, that's good. I don't know if Zoomland could hear, but she was saying that she always tells her sellers that if we go to court, this TDS is coming with us and you're gonna be responsible for any boxes that you check or don't check. So make sure you do it completely and honestly. Okay, the DIA also goes over the section 2. I did not do a screenshot of section 2 because that's basically the whole form. But the first part of section 2 is fixtures and things that are in the property that they know about. It's not saying whether they work well or not, if they're functioning, it's just, is this in the property? And it's also not stating that it goes with the property. It's just, the TDS is not a contract and it does not control which items must remain with the property after close, okay? And then the other sections in section 2 are asking about defects, malfunctions, and the things in the home that have gone wrong in the past, even if they have remedied the issue, they still need to disclose it. And this form tells them the TDS is asking you if you are aware. If it's a weird question and they have no idea what it's talking about, some things on the title and they just don't know, that answer is gonna be no. Okay, you might find out later there is something on title. But at the point when they're filling out this TDS, it's a no. All right, and now section 3. This is the part that gets filled out normally correctly, but it's incomplete because the document we're talking about is not attached with the TDS. Okay, so you have 3 options as the agent, except for that you really only have 1 option in our office. We require the AVID, AVID, however you want to call it, Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure, to be a part of the TDS. Okay, you have the obligation as the listing agent to visually go into the home, inspect it. The class that we just took was really great. He said, yes, the word visual is there, but it's actually multi-sensory because if you smell an odor, you need to disclose that as well. If you are walking and you see the floor is really soft and smushy, you're going to disclose that as well. Okay. So in our case, you are going to check the top box. See attached agent visual inspection disclosure, and then you are going to sign it. Okay, so in completing the TDS, section 1 has to be done. You mark if there's other disclosures. Section 2 has to be fully completed by your seller, so you're going to review it. You're going to make sure they didn't miss any boxes, and if they did, you're going to ask them about it. If they answered yes, you're going to make sure they have an explanation for that yes answer. And then section 3 is where you're going to check the AVID box and you have to sign it. And then you have to have your seller sign lower on page 3 as well. And that, along with your AVID, will make a complete TDS. So when you're there for your listing agreement or your pictures, you need to get your AVID done early on, so that you have it ready to go when disclosures are due.
You said 4 inspections, right? Preferably.
He said, if I recall correctly, he just doesn't want you doing it while the inspector is there because your buyer, I think he was referring to the buyer side. The buyer is gonna wanna be there talking and whatever you wanna do to be focused on just seeing what you see. Okay, so tips for completing the AVID. He was talking about, we're gonna look for defects and red flags. A defect is something that is actually wrong. For example, a cracked window, okay? And a red flag is an indication of that something is wrong, but we're unsure. So the discoloration on a wall or a cabinet, we don't know where it came from. We don't know if it's old or new. It's not our job to find out. It is not our job to say what it is. We just disclose that there is discoloration on the wall. Okay, so number one, state the obvious. I found this very interesting, what he spoke about. There is a school close to the property. Okay, it might be obvious, it might be literally right across the street, but some things aren't obvious to everyone. You simply state there is a school or there is a school close to the property. Okay, everybody has a different interpretation of what might bother them. So he said, do not make a list of what potentially could be annoying about a school across the street. So if you say, oh, traffic from the school, there's football games, it's noisy, blah, 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 but you didn't list every single thing you could think about that would be annoying about a school, a litigious buyer could say, well, you didn't mention cheerleading practice, and that's really annoying to me. Okay, so you just are vague and obvious. There is a school close to the property. Okay, 2, only facts, no adjectives. So there's a stain or discoloration on the kitchen cabinet. It's not big, it's not small, it's not blood from the murder. Like, we don't know what it is, okay? There is a stain. Okay, let the buyer figure out if it's big or small to them. And then again, number 3, only facts, no numbers. I thought this was very interesting. He had a true life situation. You would say some cracks on the back patio. Okay, you're not going to say 3, you're not going to say 2, because if a piece of furniture is moved and there's happens to be 4 cracks, then now you're in trouble because you did not disclose there were 4. So you're not going to give it a number, you're going to say some. So some can be our new favorite word. And then lastly, stay out of court. When in doubt, disclose in vague factual terms. He used the phrase surprised buyers sue. So I found that to be funny. 85% of lawsuits against agents are about red flag disclosure issues. And then disclose what is there, but no details about what may bother a buyer. Everyone is different. Okay, a true life story again, he said, was there's this incessant dog barking from the new buyer that moved in. It wasn't disclosed anywhere. They could not handle it. So they took the seller to court saying, you didn't tell us there was a dog barking. The sellers got up on the stand and were like, that wasn't a bother to us. We love that dog. They knew the dog's name. They said it reminded us of our dog that passed. We absolutely love that dog. His barking never bothered us once. So we did not disclose because it didn't bother us. Okay, so, and they actually won. They were believed that the dog didn't bother them. Okay, so that's it. Do we have questions?
So do you say that, there is a dog next door or?
His answer was, if you as the agent are there and you're doing your inspection or whenever you're there and you hear a dog and it's kind of annoying to you, you would say in your other known whatever spot on the AVID, dogs barking in the neighborhood. But to the seller, it was up to the interpretation of that seller when they completed their TDS, and it wasn't a bother to them.
So they said.
Yes. All right, any other questions? I'm gonna try to, do we have anything in the chat?
Just look right there.
Okay.
You're so good at explaining.
That was amazing.
Thank you. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, then I guess we will end for today. Good, all right.
Perfect.
All right, guys, I will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for Amy with us. And I get to go on another Zoom.
Nice. I can't figure out how to get out of here. Okay.
It was very well explained, actually, kind of better than the other gentleman did on Tuesday.